krameṇādbhiḥ śuddhaṁ kanakam pāṁsu-vyavahitaṁ yathāgnau karmāraḥ pacati bhṛśam āvartayati tathā yogācāro nipuṇam doṣa-vyavahitaṁ viśodhya kleśebhyaḥ śamayati manaḥ saṁkṣipati. I thought I'd treat myself to another exploration of the gold mining metaphor, turning it over again and again, like the goldsmith turns over the gold in the furnace. Not because it's difficult to understand, but actually it's because it's so beautifully simple. And so I thought, I'm always running into sort of mutually hurtful exchanges with Zen experts, of whom I must be one. That's why I run into, problems with others who kind of see themselves as experts. Not consciously, but just because we've been conditioned to be realistic. And anybody who regards themselves as realistic, it's like a red flag to a bull to me, because I was so severely misguided by a realist who intervened on the basis of his realistic understanding to correct my posture in a hard-minded way, and he made me hard-minded. Well, I was already hard-minded. He confirmed me in my rigidity. But anyway, let's not have an adult rant. The idea is, if you can really understand something, you should be able to explain it clearly to a child. And the problem is, we don't. The problem is we're too clever. So let's try to understand this with the mind of a child. And I realise that I've been too concerned to translate it elegantly, word for word. Whereas with the word, like the first word of the verse, krameṇa, which krama means step, so krameṇa means with a step, step by step, literally step by step. And so that includes the sense of methodically. But it also, and this occurs to me when I recite the verse as part of the 8 thoughts of a great person, it fits in right at the very beginning with āvartayati, wanting little. So krameṇa includes the meaning of going in small steps, little by little, or softly, gently, not diving in to get too eager to get to the end. It's like being content with a little bit of progress. See, we keep coming back. If this verse is part of your daily life, you fall into a pit. I've messed up again. So everything's gone wrong again, and then you go back to the round cushion, and where do you start? Krameṇa, softly, little by little, step by step, methodically, work methodically. So how do I translate krameṇa so as not to miss out any of those meanings. A child can understand all of those meanings. So I thought, well, I'll keep them all in. Softly, softly, little by little, step by step, methodically, krameṇa. I'm going to translate it all those ways, so it's clear. Ādbhiḥ, śuddhaṁ. Śuddhaṁ means washed or cleansed, and ādbhiḥ means with waters or by waters. I clarified this for Jean a couple of days ago in a comment on YouTube there, because it'd been on my mind. Let's ask clearly, who is it? The goldsmith is working at the furnace. There's another person described in Saundarananda who is the dirt washer, the guy whose job is the more humble one of washing the dirt. So, it's easier if it's the same subject in the verse. In the past, I was sort of trying to dodge that. So if you ask, who is the subject here? Actually, let's just stick to the words. He says, ādbhiḥ śuddhaṁ, washed with waters. And so we think, oh, well, okay, I suppose it could be the goldsmith himself. It could be the dirt washer, a separate person. Could be the goldsmith doing the job of the dirt washer and the goldsmith. Or it could be a separate dirt washer. But what does the word actually say? Ādbhiḥ śuddhaṁ, washed with waters or washed by the waters. And in Sanskrit, that latter understanding is more obvious because like say Bhagavato Bhāṣitam was said by the Bhagavat, was said by the Buddha, means the Buddha said it. In Pali and Sanskrit, passive with past participle, instrumental with past participle. So instrumental is ādbhiḥ, with water, by water, śuddhaṁ, washed. That expresses the agency of the word that's in the instrumental. So what I'm saying is, the simple way to translate and understand this is the gold, at the dirt washing stage, the gold is washed by the waters. And that opened, you see, because it's not, if we've fallen into the pit and everything seems to have gone wrong and we go back to the round cushion, cross our legs, sit upright, we're kind of hoping to be washed by the waters of grace, priti shalilam, in the verse in Canto 14. Yadichak pibati priti shalilam. And if he drinks the waters of grace. So these waters could be the waters of grace. So the dirt is washed by the waters. Doesn't always require a human intervention, you see. So actually, in real gold mining, that's how gold is separated. The particles of gold are separated by panning, or sometimes, the river itself does it. The little particles of gold can be lying at the bottom of the riverbed. So, washed by the waters, ādbhiḥ śuddhaṁ, washed by the waters. Kanakam, the gold, iha, in this world. So he's not talking about something abstract here. The Buddha in Asvaghosha's poem is talking about something that happens here, now, in this world. That's what happens in this world. Gold is separated from dirt, washed by the waters. Pāṁsu means dirt. Vyavahitaṁ, separated, being separated, or having been separated. Yathā, just as. āgnau, in the fire or at the furnace. So the goldsmith is working at the furnace, and at the same time it has a meaning of he's in a hot place. It's not easy work, he's in the fire. He's suffering. Although he might be enjoying his work, it's hard work. He's in the fire. Karmāraḥ means, it's from karma, which means to work or to act. So the worker, but it's also a word for specifically for a goldsmith, a craftsman. A craftsman working with gold, a goldsmith. Pacati means he bakes, he heats, or if we're talking about a goldsmith, he melts. Bhṛśam, frequently, so over and over again. Āvartayati, he turns it over. This is what a goldsmith does when he's working gold in the furnace. He turns it over and over, releasing any impurities, any chemical impurities still in the gold. Cha means and, but it has the sense of the methodical nature of the work. He can't turn the gold over until he's melted it. So cha means and then. Okay, so here's the first two lines translated so that hopefully a child can understand what's being described. Gold in this world, gold separated from dirt, washed by the waters, softly, softly, little by little, step by step. The goldsmith melts, and just as the smith in the fire methodically melts the gold and then turns the gold over and over again. So that's the metaphor. And it's a metaphor for how we practice, how we approach practice. Sitting in lotus, following the Buddha's very first instruction to not do any harms, to let happen what is good, to cleanse one's own mind. That's the teaching of the Buddhas, to cleanse one's own mind. So what does that actually mean? The Buddha here in Asvaghosha's poem is clarifying for his brother what that really means, to cleanse one's own mind. Tathā, in the same way, so. Yogācāro means the yoga practitioner, the practitioner of yoga, the practitioner. Nipuṇam, so nipuṇam here mirrors the krameṇa in the first line. So nipuṇam means skillfully, cleverly. That's the first meaning of nipuṇam. As the goldsmith does it methodically, so the practitioner does it skillfully, intelligently. He knows what he's doing because he's been taught well. Nipuṇam. But nipuṇam also has a subtler meaning of not grossly, but delicately and accurately. This is, to me, when I read those words in the dictionary, it echoed with the way I've heard Alexander work being described. Because Alexander work is a non-doing practice, not a thing where you intervene grossly. It's like the goldsmith is, the dirt washer lets the water do the work. And the goldsmith, although it's hard work in the fire, he's letting the fire do the work. He's not doing a great big intervention. He's just kind of persisting with a skillful means. It's the fire and the water and the gold itself which are really doing the work. So nipuṇam has that sense of a non-doing sense of with delicacy and accuracy. So again, nipuṇam, because it covers one word with a lot of important meanings, I've translated it as skillfully and also with delicacy and accuracy. I didn't want to lose any of those meanings, so I've translated it with 3 words instead of 1. Nipuṇam iha, again, the practitioner is in this world. He's not talking about some super spiritual or supernatural practice. It's practice iha, like the gold is in the world. The mind of the practitioner, which is like the gold, is in the world. Doṣa-vyavahitaṁ. So this mirrors pāṁsu-vyavahitaṁ, separated from dirt and separated from harm. Doṣa means harm or faults. So separated from the mind is separated from harm in the same way that the dirt is separated from faults. The gold is separated from dirt. So how is the gold separated from dirt? Methodically, little by little, step by step. And how does the Buddha describe our mind being separated from harm? Well, we have to think about other verses of Saundarananda where the Buddha describes that. He describes Shila, Samadhi and Prajna, the 3 categories in the 8-fold noble path. Shila is more preventative, so good practice, good habits prevent the harms from harming the mind. And then Samadhi is like a mountain casting off rivers. So Samadhi is like sitting like a mountain, not being disturbed by thoughts, not being disturbed by anything, as unmovable as a mountain. And in that way you cast off harms like a mountain casts off the mighty torrents of rivers. But then more subtly, so it's kind of in order of subtlety, because Shila is good practice. It suggests sort of doing the right thing, not doing the wrong thing, doing the right thing. Samadhi is more in the direction of not thinking anything, not being concerned with right or wrong practice. Just being like a mountain, just being still. So the harms are like charmed snakes. They don't attack. We render the harms powerless by sitting still in samadhi, stillness without fixity. But then prajna is understanding. In the end, that's all we need. What we need to really be free of the faults is to understand emptiness in the end. So, emptiness as to a child. The clever grown-ups think that they exist in the real world. And Asvaghoda describes that as yadi dvandvarame jagati vishaya vyagra hridaye, in a world that delights in duality, whose heart is distracted to the core by objects. If you look at adults, that's exactly how they are. They think of themselves existing in the world, which is a deeply dualistic idea, and they're running around pursuing objects all the time. They've always got an object that distracts them from enjoying being one, abiding in emptiness. Emptiness means what's happening is empty of self-existence. So there's no self that exists and no world that the self exists in. It's so simple, but it's too difficult for adults to understand because they're so clever, they're realistic, they believe in reality. You haven't got to see things like a child, you've got to see things like a realistic adult, where you exist in the real world. That's how clever Buddhists understand everything, and they're just exactly manifesting the opposite of what the Buddha taught, which is to be like a child. And like Jesus said, that is who enters the kingdom of heaven, the person who has the mind like a child, not the realistic adult who's an expert on Zen and ontology and soteriology and all kinds of clever stuff, which distracts them to the core. They're delighting in duality while talking about oneness. The oneness of subject and object they talk about. Where emptiness, so yadi satatam eko biramate, if he ever loves to be one, he doesn't bother about subject and object. He's just enjoying vasan atmarama. He's dwelling in enjoyment of himself, like a child playing, enjoying himself. That's emptiness. Enjoying what's happening. And what's happening is happening dependent on everything else that's happening. So it's totally impossible to separate subject and object. The clever adult self existing in the real world is just living in an illusion that he's conditioned to deeply believe in. What an idiot. So prajna, in the end, it's very subtle. It's not anything you have to do. You just have to see it. You have to see emptiness. That's prajna. That's understanding. And if you can understand that, then why would you do all the faults, all the harms that clever adults do? Seeing their enemies, seeing that Russia is the bad guy, the enemy. We have to beat Russia, or otherwise Russia will come and destroy Europe. They're making it up. It's all fabricated reality. It's all lies of people who delight in duality. Us versus them. A child of 3 can see it, but we can't see it because we're so clever. We listen to David Aronovich on the briefing room, just telling lies. Just telling lies. Making money and telling lies. What a disgusting, disgusting mess adults have made of the world with their clever belief in reality. My own Zen teacher was one of the worst of those. Totally turned the Buddha's teaching into its opposite by talking about the oneness of subject and object. So, nipuṇam includes that meaning. First thing, when you practice sitting, nipuṇam means do it skillfully. like an Alexander technique teacher will teach you how to sit. Don't do it, but just think up. See, Marjorie Barlow used to say, a child of 6 can understand this word, but give me a man who's been educated and God help me. She told the story of teaching a child of 6 how to inhibit and direct. You say no to doing anything, and just think these words. Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the spine lengthen and the back widen, sending the knees forwards and away. And with her hands, Marjorie will be showing the child. She would be putting meaning into those words, but nothing more than those words. Say no and think these words. Say these words. Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the spine lengthen and the back widen, sending the knees forwards and away. So Marjorie said she heard the child's mum came to pick up the child, and as they were leaving, she was able to hear them walking outside the window. And the mum said, what did you learn today? And the child said, I learned to say no and to tell my neck to be free, my head to go forward and up, my back to lengthen and widen, sending my knees forwards and away. And Marjorie said, well, how many adults after a first lesson could tell you that, you see? Because we make everything so complicated. So the Alexander work, as I was getting around to saying on my last video, but I didn't finish the story, Marjorie, when I had lessons with her, was in her 80s, and she'd started having Alexander work when she was 16. And so she would sit there or stand there saying these words like she was hearing them for the first time. So they're so simple but so deep. It's like this verse. It's really simple, but it's worth coming back to and turning it over in our minds again and again. Free your neck. Don't do it, just think it. Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up. That's where it wants to go, forward and up. Don't do anything, just think it. Head forward and up, to let the spine lengthen. As the spine lengthens, the back widens, spreading out, like melting. If you're lying on the table, like melting, widening. And if you're lying on the table with your knees bent, you send your knees up to the ceiling. Knees up to the ceiling. Or if you're sitting, send your knees forwards and away. Nipuṇam. So the first thing, shila, means you do that skillfully. That's good practice. Just think it, don't do it. Learn to move and to sit well. Then samadhi means come to stillness. It's a bit more of a subtle thing. To do with not thinking. Because thinking disturbs the stillness. Thoughts disturb the stillness. Ideas disturb the stillness. So it's more meditative kind of thing. A child can understand that, surely. Coming to quiet. Not being concerned with doing anything that you in daily life. Just having a quiet time. And then understanding is this, especially this understanding of emptiness. The world that we're living in is not made up of separate things. what's happening. We should, in light of emptiness, we see everything as happening. It's happening here and now. See, clever adults will turn that into the here and now, the ineffable here and now. The Zen master likes to talk about the ineffable here and now. But no, what's happening now has got no ineffable here and now. Now is just a way of describing what's happening. What's happening now is happening now. But if we talk about the ineffable here and now, like Zen masters imitating other Zen masters do, they're separating the present moment into something that they want to celebrate and pontificate about. It's always the same thing. They're delighting in duality. Dvandvarame jagati, in the world that delights in duality. Vishaya vyagra hridaye, its heart distracted to the core by objects. So they don't realise that when the Buddha spoke about what's happening now, he wasn't talking about anything objective, nothing separate from us who are living. In Zen, people make a distracted to the core by everything, their own practice, they make it into an object. And they become blind to what's going on. The Buddha's teaching is too simple for them. They're so clever. With their clever brains, they turn everything into an object, then study it, thinking how clever they are to understand time and space and the ineffable here and now. So, nipuṇam, in the end, it means prajna, understanding. Those three, shila, samadhi, prajna, are what the Buddha taught as a path to cleanse the mind. So nipuṇam means skillfully, but it also means delicate, with delicacy and accuracy. The mind is separated from harms with delicacy and accuracy. It's much more delicate and accurate. When a Zen master talks about the ineffable here and now, then they're lacking delicacy and lacking accuracy. It's just a gross objectification of what's happening now. They're turning it into the ineffable present moment. Stupid buggers they are. And they think they're so clever with their clever words. The imminent, ineffable here and now. It's all bullshit because they delight in duality. And their delighting in duality is so deeply held. The view is so deeply held, they don't even realise they're doing it. Nipuṇam. We have to be skillful, at the same time accurate, to see what they're up to. Because they're so good at convincing us they know what they're talking about, you see. You have to be on target, see what they're up to, and not fall for it. Doṣa-vyavahitaṁ, separated from harm. So our child mind is already separated from harm. But we go to school, we're deliberately led in harm's way. Because you go to school to learn how to fight for the empire, traditionally. Like now, they're telling us that Putin is evil, Russia is bad. So the honourable thing to do would be to, when we're at 18, maybe 16, we sign up and go and fight against the evil Putin. Absolutely disgusting lies of imperial bad guys. who want to control others instead of cleansing their own minds. And they talk about, we're the democratic ones, we're the free ones, we're the ones who support freedom. No, they're lying. The opposite of freedom is what they want. They want to subjugate everybody. They want to control everybody. They want all the money. They want everybody to borrow money from them and pay back the interest. It's not a complicated view of the world. Viśodhya kleśebhyaḥ. Now this is why you have to understand emptiness. Viśodhya kleśebhyaḥ manaḥ means the mind as object to be cleansed of afflictions. You see, if you don't understand emptiness, you'll believe the lies of your teachers who are experts in psychology. They study the mind objectively. And so that they'll convince you that the mind has to be cleansed. There's a mind out there that has to be cleansed. That's not what the Buddha meant by cleansing our own mind. He didn't mean we turn our mind into an object to be cleansed. This is why you have to, nipuṇam, at that level, you have to understand what I'm talking about, emptiness. If you believe the clever adults, you'll think that you've got an impure mind that has to be cleansed. What the Buddha's talking about here, the skillful practitioner causes to melt away. He causes to drop off the idea of a mind as an object that we have to cleanse. We separate our mind from harm, not because the mind is inherently full of harm. So in the same way that the waters naturally separate the gold and the dirt particles, we don't have to do anything. We don't have to do anything to cleanse our mind from kleśebhyaḥ, the afflictions. So the afflictions, the Buddha described that how suffering arises dependently on actions, samskaras, fabricated realities, and bhava, becoming. So those two are karma. And there are 7 kinds of suffering, which is like how the consciousness becomes divided. We believe in a separate mind and body. We experience suffering through the senses, through the 6 senses. We grow old and die. There's a pain, all that kind of suffering. And how that suffering originally arises from 3 kinds of affliction. The first one is ignorance. That's the ignorance of the adult who believes he exists as a self in the objective real world. That's ignorance, or you call it denial. It's a denial of the childlike emptiness. It's a denial of the Buddha's teaching of emptiness. That's number 1 of the 12. And number 9 is thirsting. When adults set up an object as desirable, they thirst for it. We thirst for objects. And the thirsting leads to clinging. Clinging, 4 kinds of clinging. Clinging to love, like you cling to the love of a mother. before you grow up a little bit and become more independent. Clinging to the love of a girlfriend is another one. It's not, so the affliction is not the love, it's the clinging to that love. If you're a mummy's boy, you shouldn't be a mummy's boy because you shouldn't cling to your love of your mother. That doesn't mean you can't love your mother, but you shouldn't cling to that love. And then clinging to a view is what I'm talking about. This is what clever people do. The big view that they cling to is being realistic. Clinging to a view of a separately existing self in reality. Then clinging to a story of oneself. What do you want to be when you grow up? That adults will ask you. And if you're not careful, you'll cling to that story of yourself. And then if the story turns out not to be true, you'll suffer because you cling to the story. And then the fourth kind of clinging is clinging to practice. So what we're describing now is a practitioner practicing. We shouldn't even cling to that in the end, because clinging is the affliction. In the same way, stopping clinging to your mother doesn't mean that you don't love your mother. Stopping clinging to practice doesn't mean that you stop practicing. But ultimately, we have to, if we cling to practice, that gets in the way of practice. So those are the four kinds of clinging. So what he means here, we cause to melt away the mind as object to be cleansed from afflictions. The same way that the goldsmith melts the gold. See, the gold is not workable when it's in solid form, but when he heats up the gold, melts it in the furnace, then the gold becomes soft and it becomes workable. So in the same way, the practitioner's mind becomes amenable to practice, it becomes workable, it becomes obedient, softened, when we let go of separating out things as objects. Emptiness is what helps us do that. The teaching of emptiness helps us do that. So if we understand emptiness, that frees the mind from pursuing separate objects. So a practitioner causes to melt away mind as object to be cleansed of afflictions. So śamayati manaḥ means he causes it to melt. So the first way he causes it to melt is by he frees it from the idea of a separate mind to be cleansed of afflictions. But there's also a sense, like the goldsmith at the fire, causing the mind to melt. How do we soften our mind? Well, it has to do, I think, also with embracing the suffering. Because if you sit with your legs crossed, like I've been sitting now giving this talk for 45 minutes, but actually my legs aren't hurting yet. But if I sit for another hour, my legs will start being painful. But it's not a harmful kind of pain. So that's another kind of causing the mind to melt. Because if when we suffer, you can think of how we respond to it. Like if you watch Wim Hof getting into the water, you see, that's a good example. There's two ways. If you get into freezing cold water, the person whose mind becomes hard will kind of fight against it. He'll fight. The mind will fight, become hard, and you know what it's like. A wimp gets in the water and they're all afraid and everything. But when Wim gets in the water, it's just like keeping calm. And he says, the cold. Yes, my friend, the cold. You see, that's another kind of causing the mind to melt. You can decide to how you're going to respond to the suffering. So that's another causing the mind to melt. You can decide to be soft, to accept, not to fight. And then, with a mind like that, then you can collect the mind. Saṁkṣipati. Sam means together, and kship means throw together. So it's a bit like the goldsmith throwing the gold together when he's turning it over at the furnace. How do we collect the mind? Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the spine lengthen and the back widen, sending the knees forwards and away. We just keep coming back to those directions, saying no. So the Zen master says, sit up straight. And you say, no, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do this. Like all the clever adults who discuss right posture. That's what they do. Become hard-minded, pursuing their object of right posture. No, you say no to that. No. It's like Marjorie used to say when she taught children, they loved it. I want you to be thoroughly disobedient, she would say. Well, I'm going to tell you to do something and I want you to say no. A child of 3 can understand that. But put an adult in a Zen dojo. Does he say no? No. He wants to have a good posture. Say no. Say no to trying to be right. Say no to being a good boy or a good girl. We're going in the direction of freedom. So, saying no lets the mind be soft. If you're trying to be right, if you're trying to get an object, trying to realize some idea, the mind becomes fixed. Saṁkṣipati. That's how the world is. The Buddha says in Canto 14, Vivikta saṁkṣipati viśodhya kripanam śuddhaṁ jagat. The practitioner separately, vivikta, sorrows śuddhaṁ, for the clinging saṁkṣipati, the fixed clinging saṁkṣipati jagat world, viśodhya kripanam, which is object needy. It's wretched in its desire to get an object. It doesn't love just being one. Yadi satatam eko. It's the person who abides in emptiness. He's just enjoying himself, playing. There's no separation between self and external world. We're just enjoying ourselves, which is not separate from anything else. So on the way there, we have to collect the mind. Well, how do we do that? Well, in the first place, we have to stop. We have to say no. Have to say no. Then it's like the mind melts, becomes softer, because we're not rigidly stuck on some object. And then he collects the mind. What does that mean? How do we collect the mind? Say no, let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the spine lengthen and the back widen, sending the knees forwards and away. And you can add on, pulling to the elbows, which means you're lengthening between your fingertips. If you're sitting with your hands like this, lengthening from your tips of your fingers to your elbows. As those muscles release, you think of lengthening. Pulling to the elbows and widening across the upper part of the arms, where the frightened adults like get in the cold water and the wimp does a kind of hard, tense, fighting the cold, but Wim widening across the upper part of the arms as you widen the back. So it's the opposite of becoming tense and frightened and everything pulling in. Let the neck be free. Say no. That softens the mind. That lets the mind melt. Saying no is the key. Not trying to be wrong is the golden key, Marjorie Barlow used to say. Not trying to be right. Not trying to be right. Not being the teacher's pet. Saying no. Saying no to the stupid rules and the stupid commands of adults. Saying no to all that. Saying no to trying to be right. And then, so saying no to having a good posture. There is no such thing as a good posture, but there is a good direction to go in. Say no to doing it. Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward. It means not pulling it back. Not pulling it back like when you get in the cold water, you pull the head back. No, let the head go forward. Don't do it, just think it. Head forward and up, like a tree growing up towards the light, away from the ground. Head forward and up to let the spine lengthen. As the spine lengthens, like the trunk of the oak tree lengthening up, the branches grow outwards, like the rib cage expands. When you're breathing in, of course, the rib cage expands, but when you're breathing out, the direction is the same. Even though the ribs are coming in, you're still thinking you want to be like the tree, growing every day, out and out and out. Spine to lengthen, back to widen. And send the knees forwards and away. Again, it just means the opposite of the wimp getting in the cold water, when everything pulls the legs in, want to make themselves small. No. Grow. Let the legs grow out. You release the legs out of your pelvis, and it feels great. Especially if this is difficult, if your legs start hurting, but you can still, even whatever it feels like, you can think these directions, think these words. Let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up, to let the back lengthen and widen, sending the knees forwards and away, pulling to the elbows and widening across the upper part of the arms as you widen the back. That's what the Buddha means when he says the practitioner causes the mind to melt, and then he collects it. He says no and goes through his directions over and over again. So here, translated in a way that a child can understand it, is the Buddha's metaphor of the gold miner for how a practitioner cleanses his own mind, doing no harm, letting the good stuff happen, cleansing his own mind, which is a teaching of all the Buddhas. Krameṇādbhiḥ śuddhaṁ kanakam pāṁsu-vyavahitaṁ yathāgnau karmāraḥ pacati bhṛśam āvartayati tathā yogācāro nipuṇam doṣa-vyavahitaṁ viśodhya kleśebhyaḥ śamayati manaḥ saṁkṣipati. Gold in this world, gold separated from dirt, washed by the waters, softly, softly, little by little, step by step. The goldsmith melts, and just as the smith in the fire methodically melts the gold and then turns the gold over and over again, so skillfully does a practitioner in this world cause to melt away mind as object to be cleansed of afflictions. He causes the mind, separated with delicacy and accuracy from harm, to melt, and then he collects it. Say no, let the neck be free, to let the head go forward and up. Up. To let the spine lengthen. As the spine lengthens, the back widens. Neck free, head forward and up, back to lengthen and widen, knees forwards and away. Pulling to the elbows and widening across the upper part of the arms as you widen the back. All together and one after the other.